You were taught that debt is a warning sign, something to escape, something to pay off. But in the modern economy, debt isn't a mistake. It's the design, and once you understand why, the economy looks very different. For most of human history, debt carried a moral weight. Debt meant obligation, dependence, loss of freedom. In ancient societies, unpaid debts could result in land seizure, forced labor, or debt bondage. In medieval Europe, debtors' prisons existed for a reason. Debt was not abstract. It was personal, visible, and dangerous. For governments, debt was equally feared. Excessive borrowing often led to collapse, conquest, or currency debasement. Empires fell under the weight of obligations they could not meet. The logic was simple. If you owe more than you can produce, the system breaks. So for centuries, debt was something to minimize, restrict, or eliminate. Savings mattered. Balanced ledgers mattered. Living within limits mattered. This mindset survived well into the early 20th century. Governments tried to balance budgets. Households avoided borrowing when possible. Banks were tightly constrained. Debt was tolerated, but never celebrated. So what changed? Why does the modern system not only allow debt, but actively depend on it? The transformation begins with two fundamental shifts. The first was the abandonment of hard money. For much of modern history, money was constrained by physical limits, gold, silver, or other commodities. Credit could expand, but only within those limits. Excessive lending risked collapse. That changed when economies moved to fiat currency, money backed not by metal, but by state authority and confidence. Suddenly, money was no longer scarce by nature. It became elastic. The second shift was modern banking. Banks are often described as intermediaries, institutions that take deposits and lend them out. But in reality, modern banks do something far more powerful. They create money. When a bank issues a loan, it does not transfer existing money. It creates a new deposit at the moment the loan is approved. That deposit enters the economy as spendable money. Every loan creates money. Every repayment destroys money. This means debt and money are no longer separate. They are two sides of the same system. Without debt, the money supply contracts. With more debt, it expands. This structural change quietly flipped the role of debt in the economy. Debt stopped being a side effect. It became the mechanism. Modern economies are built around one core expectation: growth. Growth in output. Growth in consumption. Growth in asset values. Debt is what makes that growth possible. When households borrow, they spend more than current income allows. When businesses borrow, they invest, expand, and speculate. When governments borrow, they stabilize demand and finance large systems. This spending fuels GDP. As long as debt grows faster than defaults, the system appears healthy. But this creates a dependency. If borrowing slows, spending slows. If spending slows, growth slows. If growth slows, markets react immediately. This is why central banks monitor credit conditions so closely. A sharp contraction in lending is not just a financial issue, it is an existential threat to the system. So rather than eliminating debt, the system manages it. Interest rates are lowered to encourage borrowing. Refinancing is promoted to extend repayment horizons. Crises are met with liquidity injections. Debt is never meant to stop, it is meant to roll forward. One of debt's most important roles is inflating asset values. When credit is cheap and abundant, it flows first into assets, real estate, equities, financial instruments. This raises prices. Rising asset prices create the illusion of prosperity. They generate paper wealth. They reinforce confidence. But this wealth is unevenly distributed. Those who already own assets benefit first and most. Those who rely on wages must borrow to participate. Debt becomes the bridge between stagnant income and rising costs. Housing is the clearest example. As credit expands, home prices rise. Rising prices require larger mortgages. Larger mortgages lock households into decades of repayment. The system does not break under this pressure. Why? Because debt obligations create predictability. predictable payments, predictable cash flows, predictable returns for lenders and investors. Debt turns uncertainty into structured income streams. From the system's perspective, this is not a flaw. It is efficiency. Debt redistributes power, not upward in obvious ways, but structurally. Lenders receive interest. Asset owners receive appreciation. Financial institutions extract fees and spreads. Governments gain flexibility. They can fund programs without immediate taxation. They can postpone political trade-offs. Meanwhile, debtors trade future income for present stability. This creates a quiet hierarchy. Those with assets leverage debt to grow wealth. Those without assets use debt to survive. Debt disciplines behavior. People with obligations are less likely to take risks, less likely to strike, less likely to exit systems they depend on. Debt does not just finance the economy, it governs it. Here is the paradox few people explain. If everyone paid off their debt tomorrow, the economy would contract violently. Money would disappear, spending would collapse, assets would fall, unemployment would rise. This is because most money exists as debt. Eliminating debt eliminates liquidity, so the system cannot allow universal repayment. Instead, it manages the pace. Debt is refinanced, extended, restructured. Old obligations are replaced with new ones. Debt is not meant to end. It is meant to persist. Government debt operates under the same logic, but at scale. Deficits are no longer viewed as failures. They are viewed as tools. During downturns, governments borrow to stabilize demand. Central banks ensure that borrowing remains affordable. As long as markets believe the system is stable, debt is sustainable. The danger is not borrowing. The danger is losing confidence. This is why governments prioritize credibility, credit ratings, and market trust, even over electoral promises. Debt binds political decision-making to financial stability. Debt has been rebranded. It is no longer framed as risk, but responsibility. Build your credit. Good debt. Leverage wisely. As populations age, productivity slows, and growth becomes harder to sustain, debt will expand further. Not because it solves problems, but because it postpones them. Debt buys time. Debt is not a personal failure. It is the operating system of the modern economy. Once you understand that, the rules become clearer. Subscribe to stay informed, not confused.